Assalamualaikum. I hope you all are fine. So in today's videos, you can easily find the characteristic and mantissa of log values, and we learn how we can correctly read the log table. For this we have to start exercise 2.3, that is find the logarithm of the following number if possible. So the first number is 5313. So we have to find the log value of that number. In this question, first we have to write in scientific notation as a first condition for the value to find in log is that we have to put the decimal after first non-zero number, that is 5. So there is no decimal in question, so we have to assume that decimal is after 3. So to put that decimal after 5, we have to write in scientific notation, and in scientific notation we write it as 5.313 multiply as we move to the left side of the decimal, so the power is positive, and counting the number of digit 1 2 3, so the power of 10 become 3. So we write it in scientific notation, that's the first step. So after this we can easily find the characteristic. Here the characteristic is the power of 10, that is 3. Now we have to find mantissa. For this we have to look in log table. Now look how we can find the value in log table. So we have to find 53, we have to find 53 in 1 and then add the column value of 3. How we can see in log table, value of 53 in 1, that is 7251, and now moving across we have to find the value in third column, that is 2. So adding these two values we get mantissa, that is 7251 plus 2. So here mantissa equals to 7251 plus 2, that is equals to 7253. So this is the mantissa. Now log of 5313 equals to for this we have to add mantissa and characteristic, that equals to 3.7253, which is the required log value of 5313. In second part there is a value 4580, so we have to find the log of that value. First we write it in scientific notation. For this we assume the decimal is after 0, so to put that decimal after 4, as the decimal we are moving to the left side of the decimal, so power is even, and counting the number of digit 1 2 3. So in scientific notation we write it 4.5 multiply 10 power 3. So here characteristic equals to 3, and what is mantissa? For mantissa we have to look in log table. So when we look in log table, the value of 45 into 8 is 6609, and there is no 0 column, so only mantissa is 0.6609. 0.6609. So the log of 4580 equals to, adding characteristic and mantissa, that is 3.6609, which is the required answer. In third part, the question is 9.613 and we have to find the log of that number. As to find log and for characteristic, the number should be written in scientific notation. For scientific notation, the condition is that decimal should be after a non-zero number, first non-zero number, that is 9. So here decimal is already after a non-zero number at its reference position. What is reference position? A position between after non-zero number, that is between 9 and 6. So decimal is already present at its reference position, means after a non-zero number. So in that condition, characteristic always equals to 0. For example, in scientific notation, if I write it, that is 9.613 multiply 10 power 0, because the decimal is already after a non-zero number. So characteristic is 0, we can write as characteristic 0, and to find mantissa we have to look 96 in 1 and adding the value of third column. So here you can see in log table we have to look at 96 in first, 96 in 1. So here in 1 the value of 96 in 1 equals to 9827. That is 9827. And now look at third column. Look in third column. In third column the value of 96 is 1. So we have to add 1 in 9827, that is mantissa. So the mantissa is 0.9828 and the value of log 9.613 equals to, adding characteristic and mantissa we get the answer 0.9828, which is the required answer. In fourth part, the number is given 110.9. We have to find the log of that value. First, we write it in scientific notation, as the condition for scientific notation is that the decimal should be after a non-zero first left hand non-zero number, that is 1. So for this, to move that decimal after first non-zero number 1, as we move to the left side the power is even and counting the number of digit 1 2. So in scientific notation we write it 1.109 multiply 10 power 2, which is in scientific notation. So from this the characteristic equals to 2 and mantissa. For mantissa we have to look in log table, value of 11 in 0 and in add 9 column value. Now look in log table, the value of 11 in 0. The value of 11 in 0 is 0414, and looking in column 9. Looking in column 9 the value is 35. Value is 35. So we have to add 0414 in 35, which is the required mantissa. That equals to 0414 plus 35 plus 35, that equals to 0449. So this is the mantissa. So the log of 110.9, by adding characteristic and mantissa we get the answer 2.0449, which is the required answer. In 5 part we have to find the log of value 52.39. For this we first have to write it in scientific notation, that is move that decimal point after a non-zero number, first non-zero number 5, as we are moving to the left side of the decimal, so the power is positive, and counting number of digit, there is only one digit. So in scientific notation we write it 5.239 multiply 10 power 1. So from that, characteristic is 1. And Mantissa, for Mantissa we have to look in log table 52 in 3 and then adding the value of 9 column. So in log table we have to look 52 in 3. So 52 in 3. 52 in 3 value is 7185, and in 9 column we have to add 7. So we have to add 7 in 7185, which is the Mantissa. Adding Mantissa 7185 and value of 9 column 7, we get the answer 2971. Adding 5 and 7, there is 12 and 1 carry. So this is the required answer of Mantissa, and Mantissa is 0.7192. So the log of 52.39 equals to, adding characteristic and Mantissa, 1.7192. So in 6 part there is a number given 0.01209. So first we have to write the number in standard form, scientific notation. So in scientific notation we know we have to move that decimal after a first non-zero number, that is 1. As we are moving to the right side of the decimal, so the power of 10 become negative, and counting the number of digit 1, 2. So write in scientific notation as 1.207 multiply 10 power minus 2. So here characteristic equals to minus 2, and Mantissa. For Mantissa we have to look in table 12 in 0 and adding the value of 7 column. Now look in log table, the value of 12 in 0, value of 12 in 0 is equal to 0792, and looking in 7 column the value is 25. So we have to add 25 in 0792, which is the Mantissa. So by adding the two numbers that we find in log table, the answer is 7. So the Mantissa is 0.0817, and the log of 0.01207 equals to, adding characteristic and Mantissa, that equals to, so we can also write minus 2 in log form as true, which is the required answer. Now in 7 part the value is given in standard notation. We have to write in scientific notation to find the log value, as we have to move the decimal after a first non-zero number, that is 9, as we are moving to the right side of the decimal, so the power is negative, and counting the number of digit 1, 2, 3. So in scientific form we write it as 9.3 multiply 10 power minus 3. From that, characteristic is equals to minus 3. And Mantissa, for Mantissa we have to look in table 93, as after 93 there are no digits, so we can look in table of 93 into 0 and adding the value of 0. So here in log table the value of 93 in 0 is 9685, which is Mantissa. So the Mantissa is 0.9685, and the log value of 0.0093 equals to, adding characteristic and Mantissa, which is the required answer. 8 part is 1 trillion. We have to find the log value of 1 trillion. As we know that we can write 1 trillion as 1 multiply 10 power 12. So here characteristic is 12, and for Mentisa we have to look 10 into 0. In log table you can see the value of 10 in 0 is 0, 0, 0. So the Mentisa is 0, 0, and the log value of 1 trillion equals to, adding characteristic and Mentisa, 12.00, which is the required answer. So the 9 part is we have to find the log of that value 0.00004. So first we have to write it in scientific notation, that replace that decimal point after first non-zero number, that is 4. As we are moving to the right side of the decimal, so the power is negative and counting the number of digit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in scientific notation we write it as 4.0 multiply 10 power 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minus 5. From that characteristic is minus 5 and Mentisa. So for Mentisa we have to look for, as it is 4, so we assume here we have to look 4 in log table. So as you know that there are double values in log table, so we assume there are 2 zeros uh, after 4, so we have to look at 40 into 0. So 40 into 0 is 6021, which is the required Mentisa. Mentisa is 6021, and the log of 0.00004 equals to, adding characteristic and Mentisa, that is, which is the required answer. In 10 part we have to find the log value of 4. Since it is a single digit, so we assume that there are zeros after that. So first we have to write in scientific notation, as decimal is already at its reference position, so in scientific notation write it 4.0 10 power 0, characteristic is 0, and for Mentisa we have to look 40 into 0 in log table. So again the value of 40 in 0 is 6021, which is the Mentisa. So Mentisa is 6021, and adding characteristic and Mentisa we find the value of log of 4, that equals to 0.6021. In question number 11 we have to write the number again in scientific notation and assume that the decimal is after 0. So we have to move that decimal after a non-zero number, as we are moving to the left side, so the power is even and counting the number of digit 1, 2, 3. So in scientific notation we write it as 4.0 multiply 10 power 3. So here characteristic is 3 and Mentisa. For this we have to look 40 into 0 in log table. As we look above, the value is same, that is Mentisa 0.6021. So here the Mentisa 0.6021, and the value of log 4000 equals to, adding characteristic and Mentisa. In 12th part we have to find the log of value 54. First write in scientific notation, that is 54 multiply 10 power 0. So here the characteristic is 0, as we can assume that after 54 numbers are 0, 0. So obviously the decimal is already at its reference position, so characteristic is 0. So for Mentisa we have to look in log table 54 into 0. So looking in log table, the value of 54 in 0 is 7324, which is the Mentisa. 0.7324. So here is a little mistake in characteristic. As in scientific notation we have to put the decimal after first non-zero number, that is 5. So we assume the decimal is after 4. So when we put it after 5 and moving to the right side, left side, power is positive and counting one digit, so here the value of characteristic 5.4 power is 1 and the value of characteristic is 1. Now adding characteristic and mantissa, we find the value of log 54 as 1.7324, which is the required answer. In 13 part, you can see the decimal is already at its reference position. Like after a first non-zero number, decimal is already present at its position. So in this case, we can write it in standard notation, already in scientific notation 10 power 0. So characteristic, when the decimal is already at its reference position, characteristic is 0. So for mantissa, we have to look 10 into 0 and adding the value of 9 column. Now look in log table, the value of 10 in 0, value of 10 in 0 is 0000, and in 9 column you can see the value is 38. So adding 38 into 0000, this is the required mantissa. So the mantissa is 0.0038. So adding characteristic and mantissa, we find the value of log 1.009 as 0.0038. In second last part, there is a question 0.1009 and we have to find the log of that value. First, we have to convert it into a scientific notation. For this, the decimal should be after a non-zero number. First left hand non-zero number, that is 1. So we have to move that decimal after that point. Since we are moving to the right side of the decimal, so the power is negative and counting number of digit is 1. So in scientific notation, write it 1.009 multiply 10 power minus 1. So here characteristic equals to minus 1 and mantissa, for mantissa we have to look in table value of 10 in 0 and 9. So in previous part the mantissa remains the same as we look 10 in 0 and adding the value of 9 column, that is 0.0038. So combining characteristic and mantissa, the value of log 0.1009 equals to 38, which is the required answer. Last part is question number 15, that you have to find the value of log of minus 4. Since the value is negative and the log of negative value does not exist, so we write the answer of that question that it is impossible to find the log of minus 4. So in that point we have completed our exercise 2.3. I hope you will like my method and you will find it easy. So please like, subscribe my channel and comments